Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Меня зовут Сергей.
Hello, colleagues. My name is Sergei Gardechik. I'm Director General of SideRock. And today we are having the finals of the open source projects of school children and students, which was held by a community with the support of various companies. This contest lets the young show what they have developed and participate in the open source community. Positive Technologies has joined forces with us to arrange the cybersecurity track. The idea behind it was that school children and students can present their projects and try to increase the level of security of open projects by looking for vulnerabilities, fixing them, and improve them overall. Well, this hasn't happened, so that's our first attempt. On the other hand, more than 20 interesting projects have been filed, and the jury has picked 5 most interesting ones. Today, well, unfortunately, we don't have all the participants, and we didn't quite manage with the online part of the presentation. Nevertheless, today we'll hear about 3 projects. The Headsplit Project. This is the modular platform to do a pen test, so you can code exploits and use them. We also have a utility to restore information from RTTI, and this is to help in reverse development of software. And we also have a utility to simplify the life of the security experts and penetration experts, a Telegram bot to identify audio deepfakes, and a crypt exploiter, a console piece of software based on modular programming. And this is for cryptography. Okay, the format. Our participants will have a pitch session. The jury and all the participants will ask questions, and then the jury will kind of provide their final verdict, and will have the great prizes as a result. Okay, let's start with you. So I believe that you have crypt exploit. That's great. Hello, my name is Andrei Restov, and my colleague is Alexander Konovalov. And today we'll share with you an open source tool for cryptography tasks called Crypt Exploit. Some background. We are part of the school CTF games, and there we run into cryptography problems. To solve them, we need to use a lot of various scripts, algorithms, and tools. So we have accumulated them and decided to arrange them to speed up their use. And that's why we decided to code some software which would increase everything from our own handmade scripts to the well-spread solutions. When we have showcased our project, we have heard many questions, so we'll answer them now. What do you need to know? To use crypt exploit, you should have some basic knowledge of cryptography and some general understanding of the software use. So who needs it? The project can help any user and developers in testing the services and identify vulnerabilities. How does it work? Well, Crypt Exploit is an open source project based on module coding, so any user can expand it easily. We have used Python as the key coding language. It's well spread and quite easy to learn, and we have also supported other programming languages for the functions of the modules. To standardize the modules, we have developed two templates for Python and for other programming languages. Now, there are several cryptographic modules connected to our project, like root encryption, RS5 tool, and others. We believe that the project can be further developed by improving the API and adding new modules. We are open to hear your ideas, and we'll thank everyone to join the project. I'd like to thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak here. Thank you very much for your attention, and now we are ready to take your questions. The interpreter cannot hear the question.
Нет, это как раз-таки является одним
The answer, no. These are the next steps to add this functionality. Now you can use these modules one by one. But now we have all the shell commands which work in the pipes.
Да, это, можно сказать, криптоспойт.
Well, indeed, Cryptosploit is a manager to use various cryptography tools. The question is of the mic.
Ну вот смотрите, взять, например,
The answer. Okay, we can take hashcat. So when we want to pick a hash, we should know the type of hash, and we should remember all the flags of hashcat. Using Cryptosploit, this problem will be solved instead of you. So you use as an input the word list for brute and the hash. And it will determine the type of the hash and will fix all the flags for you. So this is to simplify the use of all tools. In this module, we use the open source library on hash. It is a very good library.
Раз. Всем привет, меня зовут Никольский.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ivan Nikolsky, and now I'm sharing my Headsplit framework.
Извините.
I beg your pardon.
Что происходит с презентацией?
What's amiss with the presentation?
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Извините, пожалуйста. Для начала стоит ответить на вопросы, что
Okay, what is Headsplit? Why Headsplit? Why I started developing it?
Для начала немного предыстории.
Some background.
Я считаю, что мой проект
What makes me think that my project should be used instead of Metasploit, and why I decided developing it to replace this popular framework? Well, I believe Metasploit is hard to understand, and it's missing a lot of documents. When I tried to code a module, I went to the RX repository, so the key API, and I didn't find there any documents of some of the functions I needed. And if you go to the wiki or the Metasploit website, you can find there a lot of difficult terminology, which will be hard to crack for a young pen tester. That's why they, well, like students who just start doing it, they cannot code models for exploitation. The API is quite entangled and difficult to get through. This is an issue of this Metasploit as other frameworks. Well, when you have a lot of functions bolted on each other and you have different configuration and split by the functions, the story isn't that good, because you should bring the functions for payloads into the class payloads and not to any other class. Another issue is that the developers of this framework have implemented one and the same function several times in several classes. And this is not right. You should use one implementation several times for clear API. And there are many subsettings in the modules which you don't need. They make the code difficult to understand. And for instance, my framework will determine on its own which options should be configured based on the target system. It does it without any serious problems so far. It considers all the finest details. There are also old ways there to send the payloads. So when I tried to use Metasploit to exploit one vulnerability, the payload sending module mixed up the bytes, which made the payload impossible to run. Frankly, I was pissed off. That's why I decided to set my own method to send the payload method, which is universal for all the Unix-like systems as well as Windows. The programming language. Well, initially, Metasploit was coded on Perl, and then it was recoded using Ruby. And I believe Ruby is not as popular as my language, Python. Well, okay, raise your hands if you have coded professionally using Ruby. And Python? Okay, the majority, I would say. Yeah, indeed. And now let's compare the popularity of these languages taken from various sites. Okay, this is the Ruby popularity and the Python popularity. Okay, in red you can see Python, and Ruby is dark green, so you can see the difference. Okay, why Headsplit? Okay, the code is straightforward. API in Metasploit is quite entangled. So the idea was to disentangle it. So I started with my API on Python from scratch, and the idea was to make it clear. High speed. Rational implementation of functions and algorithms sped up the framework, which sped up the module launch generation of payloads, their encryption and sending. Automation. All the sub-settings are configured in an automated way inside the Headsplit base, which helps you save the time in terms of configuration. The web interface. Okay, a terminal is cool, but when you can see the picture, it's even better. That's why I decided to code the interface from scratch, which has made Headsplit much more beautiful and easier to understand. Just a few clicks and you are there. Documentation. Now I'm documenting all the function pretty thoroughly. I code templates for modules, payloads, and plugins, and I comment on all the steps. And the beginners will have an easy time trying to use it to code exploits for the contests and so on. Various interfaces, so the text version and the graphical version. the text interface is ready, it has all the functions, and the graphical one is being developed. The goals of the project. Here they are. Number one is training, to help the beginners code their own exploits in a convenient environment, which is easy to understand. High performance, high speed of modules, and a powerful arsenal. Now I'm coding models for various platforms, vulnerabilities, CVEs, and I'm expanding the scope of all the modules. Here you can see the basic functionality. Here we are looking for the models exploiting the vulnerabilities in the Nostromo web app. Then we select by ID, look for the options to be changed, then the host and port are set, then we determine the payloads which are available, then we install the payload, then we look at the encoders to work around the firewall or filtering, so we install it. This time it's a Xcore for the x64 platform, and then we send the payload to the server through this vulnerability. Then the session opens, and here you can see the shell. So if you go out of it, this session will be saved. So you can reload it, and you can download the file, and so on. So I have all the functions. Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you for your pitch. Well, you said that Metasploit gives you a lot of unnecessary settings. What kind of settings are you talking about here? If it is all default set, we just set the target. And okay, you're talking about the target in the module? Well, I'm talking about your comment that there are some unnecessary settings in Metasploit in the module configurations. Okay, what kind of configurations are you talking about? Okay, in the Metasploit module, you can set the platform the module is targeting. Okay, an exploit of a platform, say Linux. And then for some reason, you need to pick the targets. I don't know why you need it. As a matter of fact, the framework can pick the payload it needs or the exploitation vector. So you will not have to identify each of them. I don't think it's necessary. Okay, I coded this model to exploit vulnerability in the Apple iOS, iOS 10. When you click the link and, in the WebKit bug will reboot your device. It's already implemented. I looked at the model structure. There we have the platform, Apple OS, and then we have the target, Apple OS. I don't know why you need it, because it will just, complicate the picture. That's why I just have a couple of lines. This is one of the examples. Well, I've been unhappy with the number of modules. Thank you. Thank you. You mentioned the bad documents for Metasploit. Well, obviously, we all know that Metasploit stems from far ago, and this is a big project. Well, people would joke that Metasploit is one of the biggest Ruby projects. Would you say that this can be this kind of source of the project, and you'll face problems, and your project will face the same problems when it grows? The more functions, the more resources you'll need. And to make it readable, well, the documents will have to be maintained in a readable format. And the second important thing is documents as a benefit of the new framework. Okay, this is an open source, so you can cause improvement. You can improve Metasploit's documents. Why are you not improving in the documents? Why are you coding your own product here?
Проблема, вот сразу отвечу на последний вопрос, в том, что По-моему,
I'll take the last question first. I believe that the Ruby syntaxis is much more difficult than the Python syntaxis. The important thing to me was to recode Metasploit to Python. And then I started thinking about the negatives I started fixing. And as for the documentation, so why I'm not improving the Metasploit documentation? Well, just as any other open source project. Well, apart from the documents, well, we're talking about open source projects in general. So this is an issue of many open source projects. So you can improve open source by code and documentations and translations. Indeed. Well, instead of adding documents to Metasploit, I decided to code a tool with fixed problems with its own set of documents. And the important thing, as you mentioned, the problems of big open source projects, they're difficult to document. Indeed. So when you start develop an open source project, why not document every function, meaning how it should be developed? So you don't bring it together later and document it, but rather you do it from the outset. That's why I'm doing it. That's why my documents are more expanded. When I started implementing module system and the payload, I documented everything. I had an article on how you should code the modules. And then I changed this with fixing the bugs.
Это пока ваш энтузиазм. Ну, в том смысле, что...
They think it's based on your enthusiasm. Well, Metasploit has been there for more than a dozen years. It's been recoded from one language to another. Now you are enthusiastic, and you have answered this question, that the reason wasn't behind the documents, but rather the wish to make it good in a different language. So, sometime when the project is growing, or maybe it's not growing, maybe because you don't have enthusiasm, or there can be some other issues, so it will be just another framework. Well, I don't think so. Metasploit started with the enthusiasm of the developers, HDMUR, the one who started developing it. But you know, any tool like that can grow to become something bigger. So, and now if you believe that despite all the differences, well, maybe they are not big, well, I believe that the framework is going to develop in a different direction versus Metasploit. It will not be just a poor twin of Metasploit. It will be like that in terms of interface, but it will be completely different in terms of the structure of the code and of the exploits. And this will not be just some artificial difference to avoid mixing them up. I believe this will improve the functionality and will make it more convenient, because the time is changing, and Metasploit will be history. Okay, it might be advanced today. Indeed, I believe that it is advanced. But, you know, times are changing. I will grow up, some guys will stop using Metasploit, some people will want something new, and that's what I'm offering. Do you understand that Metasploit has been there for, well, a lot of time, considering the growth and development of a generation, I would say. I believe it's there for about 15 years, yeah, dozens of years, indeed. So it has been time-proven, you know. I mean, all these years, we've had the community which has been developing around Metasploit, and I don't think it's time to forget about it. Well, I don't think we should forget about it. Well, I've mentioned that with time, maybe it can be replaced by something different. And I believe I should mention one more thing. Well, Metasploit is more for professionals. I mean, well, my personal experience. When I started dealing with CTF, I tried to code a model in Metasploit. Maybe this wasn't the best solution. Maybe I should have used some small Python-based script, and I failed. Well, okay, if I was to blame, that would have been fine. Ask my colleagues whether they tried, and they did. And the major issue I found there was the difficulty in understanding the code. when they were looking at other modules, so they couldn't understand the code, because initially they were taught to use Python for programming, but not Ruby. And I believe that at this moment, the goal is to provide a convenient environment for the beginners, pen testers, and Metasploit can be an environment for professionals, because it's more for advanced experts. That's my impression at least. Do you agree? Well, I believe that's just a framework. Okay. You have mentioned another important thing, Ruby versus Python. Have you considered multi-canvas? Say again? Well, have you considered Immunity Canvas? This is a Python-based framework for exploits. I haven't heard of it. Can you give me the title again? No, I haven't heard about it. I know only one framework, but it looks like Metasploit on Python. This is Routesploit. I haven't heard about it. Okay, it has quite a lot of stars at GitHub. But when I tried to launch it, it was positioned as Metasploit for routers and or routers and the Internet of Things. But when I launched it, well, a lot of mistakes were shown. But when I fixed it, it didn't send payloads because it was used the method using the echo command, which wasn't used in the systems. So I believe they should have used this sending of payloads through printf or something else. And well, this is my experience. So maybe somebody else managed. Well, I started coding it considering the problems I found in Metasploit and analogs of it. Any other issues? Any other questions? Hello, thank you. All of respect to you. A good speech. I have a question. What about performance? So I believe you mentioned that Metasploit is slow. I didn't say it was slow. I said that Headsplit is quicker because it's not that bulky yet versus Metasploit. And also, well, I looked at the code of Metasploit. Well, I didn't kind of rewrite it. I coded similar functions, but I was doing it in a more rational fashion, like the algorithms. I coded them in such a way that they should work quicker. I looked at the time. And if you consider the speed of modules or modules to send payloads, you know that Metasploit stores modules in the database. It is connected, then you pick the module, right? So they have a database. We also have it, but it's quite straightforward. That's a file, and this makes the selection of payload or the module a quicker thing. You just say, use the index or the title of the module to be picked in a second. In Metasploit, if the module is complicated, like for Nostrum, the one I recorded, which uses the Nostroma vulnerability, you pick it, it configures the payload and something else, I don't know what, and it spends more time doing this. Well, in Headsplit, the module will be loaded within a split of a second, and for Metasploit, 2 seconds or 1.5 seconds will be needed. Okay, thank you, but if it becomes something bigger, it will be really cool. Thank you. One more question. We have the KSM Venom, so they can generate the DLL or exe file, or you can bring it to the shortcut. Do you have anything in your framework? Yes, indeed, and this has been implemented. And this has been implemented, but not as the Venom. No, it's not Venom. It's well, in the API called PEX, we have a module which generates binaries for the PE, portable executable for Windows, and for macOS, ELF, DLL, ESCO, the libraries, and libs, the dynamic libraries for macOS. And this module works with all of these popular formats of .exe files, and it can wrap the shellcode by this executive file, and can also introduce it into a ready binary. And so the CLI for this module, I'm now coding it. It's under development. But if you want to generate a binary, well, it's there in the module, and we have documents for this. And one more thing, if you want to generate the binary quicker, we have modules. We have the Headsplit module, which is called XLR generator. You just bring the payload there, and the encoder, if you need it, and the format of the executive file is not needed. The platform will determine it, and it will generate the binary. So all of that is done.
Good. And if the method for avoiding, is there a method for AV avoidance? We know that Metasploit exes are detected. Well, actually, encoders currently don't work this way. They are used to avoid filters. There are no solutions currently like that, but I'm working on an encoder that will, well, how do I put it? First of all, it will need to change, the places of the bytes, but at some point in time, that might lead to an evasion method for AVs. And if any arise, they would, of course, be added to the list for the antiviruses. So every new method is usually included in the AV database. So avoiding AVs would probably be something that you need to keep secret. Thank you. With that, that's all. Thank you. Thanks indeed. Here's the QR code leading to the site and some links to the project. Thank you.
Раз. Так, меня слышно?
Do you hear me okay? My name is Ilya Shaposhnikov, and I have 5 minutes to sell my utility idea. Pentest Collaboration Framework is a utility to exchange, process, and store information, the data about the pentesting projects. So during pentesting, we gather a lot of project information on the servers, domain names, open ports, comments left by the testers, the services themselves, credentials, files, vulnerabilities, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of info, and you probably cannot mention it all on one slide. I had this task at work, and I knew that in a couple of months I will have a lot of such projects. So the only solution I found was to create myself, because the ones I found on the internet did not work. So I created the Pentest Collaboration Framework as a utility enabling you to collaborate with other utilities like Nmap to send XML to Nmap, to work with networks and subnet, the servers. And a key thing was that you can have a number of teams, like blue team and red team, and they should not have any access to the red team project. So using these collaboration frameworks, you can place it on the internet and work together, but managing the rights. The vulnerabilities that we found need to be edited, need to be monitored, and of course, the notes by the testers, the files that they found, everything should be attached to the projects. General information. It's programmed on Python v3, 3.9. It's cross-platform. It can be run anywhere where you have Python interpreter. It's cross-platform. It uses cross-platform libraries. It's portable, so you can put it on a flash drive and open by double click. It has open source on GitLab and some statistics on the amount of time it took. Database. It uses SQLite 3. I know it's slow, but it supports Postgres if you want, and you can just change everything in a config. 23 utilities, map, pursuit, and so on. So how does this system, the user space system, look? We have our config, our logs, our templates of vulnerabilities or vulnerability substitution, tokens, API tokens. If you have a person whom you don't want to trust with the Shodan API token and you don't want him to use it, you just add it. And, without knowing the token itself, he can use it. And user information. And, of course, the teams, the admins, and the projects that can be attached to both users and the teams themselves, so that everyone in the team has access. Here's one of the screenshots. Here's how I build the graph. We are improving of course, the look and feel. That's how we attack that, how we add the rules. We have a connection from an Apple computer to Linux computers, and you can attack some PC on 2222 AP. So now we play standoff, and we have huge networks there, and of course it was useful for us to build those graphs.
И также почему именно вообще за это создал?
And it's very convenient. So why did I decide to create one? Why did I not find any alternative solution? So here is the table of the closest one was the layer framework. Its main issue was it's written on Java. It needs to be rebuilt every time after patching. And the second issue was that their build was not really buildable for on other machines. So you would not be able to build a new version with all the needed utilities support for half a year. So Python is portable, Pandas WS is also portable, cross-platform, free, and it's not outdated. I understand, at some point in time I will stop developing it, but the positive thing in this is that as Python code is quite convenient, it allows the developers to add their own functions. It's very template-based, and you can integrate with other utilities. There's also a data export capability, and it's used quite often. So if you route the hashes and add them and put them to the IP addresses, then it has a chat. It's more of a feature. And an important criteria was that the utilities were aimed at managers, not at tech specialists. And it was a big issue for AttackForge, why we didn't choose it. The API being used is Swagger API and also the vulnerability templates. And there's some experience using it. It exists for like half a year. It has 60 stars on GitLab, 130 people in the utility chat used in the current work process, and I presented it on different conferences. Your questions, please.
У меня больше не вопрос. Просто хотел сказать спасибо.
It's Less of a question, more of a thank you. I started using this utility on the last standoff, and I use it on this standoff, and it's very convenient. And I did not have any questions using it. It's really, truly useful thing.
Спасибо за доклад. Интересно, конечно, с точки зрения именно практической.
Thank you for your presentation. It's really interesting in terms of how you use it practically, this framework. Did you look at third-party services integration? Dedupes, vulnerability analysis, open source solutions, defect dosher, to take some part of work from them and maybe load something into them. Yeah, I did, but my concept is that I can run the service on the internet and other users, not only me, will be able to use it, and it will be safe. If we connect to other services using REST API, we allow arbitrary users to connect to some API addresses. So that would create issues with SRF, because we have network requests for arbitrary network addresses. So this might work for administrators, and I looked at the Dodger. But the question I asked was about the big part of results aggregation from different tools, understanding them, pushing them into one single concept. And you probably create a number of plugins. And the other part would have to do with merging this all. All you need to do is pen testing. So the part that has to do with aggregating the reports and scanners, there are solutions, open source solutions that enable gathering, deduping of this all. So maybe you can add some feeds, enrich them, maybe have two services where you concentrate on what is lacking. And by the way, thanks for this great table. That explains a lot. There's another issue. The goal of this development was to help the pen testing team. And if we aggregate and monitor, that's more for a blue team when you monitor whether the vulnerability was fixed or not. So yeah, you can go back to this project, and people usually come back to work with us. But our aim was more on a technical specialist working during the pen test. So things like aggregating vulnerabilities are quite rare with them. One more question. Do you have some offline cache? It's a web app, right? Sometimes, especially in pen tests, internet availability is a hard question. Local caching might be needed with synchronization. Well, local cache is not available because it allows the users to add any amount of data into the database. Imagine you had 1 gigabyte of data, and the database would, this will enable us to DDoS the system. How does it connect with being offline? You talk about the integration with some offline service. So your solution should help the team that works on an object, for internal audit, for example, to connect the knowledge of all of them to move further to the goal. Sometimes the internal pen test would not allow you to give the data back in real time and upload it to the system. So the question was, If you have a gigabyte of data, how do you upload the data? Well, I cannot answer in general. The user can go from an IP address to an IP address. There's also a function for multiple addition of different types of data in different formats, because many testers like to just, make notes in a notebook, and you can add a lot of data, like credentials with the passwords or the hash, adding ports, hosts. So if they want, they can batch upload this. I understand that your solution implies the internet availability, right?
На диске своем свою локальную версию делаю, а потом просто делаю экспорт из локальной версии именно в плане, там есть специальные поиски.
I do my local version, and I have the search functionality to search by IP addresses, and it's a flexible setting so that I export those lists from one PCF instance to another utility instance and work with it. So it's present there.
Не сказать, что это прям все данные так можно перенести, потому что данные достаточно гибкие.
Not all the data can be transferred this way, though. All the data can be transferred because the format is flexible. A bit of feedback. We've used this utility as part of our practical activity. Compared to Dradis, it's a very interesting solution. We use network monitoring, especially for big network sizes. The issue here is when the network is big, and if you integrate, you cannot import all the data into the utility. And map scans, or Max Patrol scans, are better in that sense. For higher loads and using more of that, Postgres style things. So it's not a student project at all. And the suggestion would be maybe to add some Dradis-like capabilities to upload and download the whole project and putting it on another instance. So this is a very useful thing, and if you can implement it, that would be great. Because with the pen test, when the group arrives on the spot, on site, you need to publish some data later on a local machine and work with the data to, ensure the whole process works. And I'm glad that we have such guys like you. Regarding export and import, it's planned for quite a while. I added this on GitLab, and I'm thinking on how we can avoid the deletion of the host and avoiding with huge amount of data. With GitLab, the solution will be that I will change the library, the database, for working with databases, and they will be object-oriented, and I think this will improve the speed. Thanks. And one more comment. There is an important point for the red teams, and as you participate in the standoff. First, network monitoring tool, based on the network map to highlight and visualize the hosts that we work with. Because some hosts, some services are not visible, because at some point in time they are not available, and we know nothing about them. So when the person works with them, he says, yeah, I've implemented this function, and new hosts, new ports arise. So some function that will run continuous monitoring is important. It's not implemented in some places, but that would be a good thing for the future. That would be a killer feature. Yeah, let me give you a comment. I have some development rules, and the utility itself should be published on the internet. And of course, such monitoring system will not be allowed if it's put on the internet. So probably that will be another more separate module that will be talking to the utility through the API, sending the data it has captured, but not in the utility itself. Thank you.
Коллеги, у нас, к сожалению, подходит к концу время.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and some feedback to the people giving feedback. Guys, this is open source, Do your requests, write some code, improve it. I'm glad that those are not just, abstract things with lab work by the guys looked at by a couple of people. This is a great thing that is used by, people in the audience. And if we have feature requests, then it's alive and it will keep developing. We are a bit over time. And thus we decided, together with the jury, we have prizes for you. And I wanted to tell everyone in this room, this was the first contest of this type, but we will continue doing this together with the vocational team. And if you have some young guys, students, school guys, who'd like to create some security projects or open source projects, let them participate. This will clearly be noticed. And a small announcement. There are some t-shirts there. Please feel free to take them. Thank you. Thank you indeed.